My name is Cherry Peters, and I serve as the moderator of the Presbytery, at least until February. Welcome to this special meeting of the Presbytery of the James, called to receive reports from the Committee on Nominations and the Mission Council. A few preliminary matters, and you should have been alerted when you signed on that we are recording today's meeting. I want to recognize Franklin Redding, who has agreed to serve as parliamentarian for us tonight at the State Clerk's request. Thanks for your assistance, Franklin. I'm most grateful. I also want to acknowledge Josh Andrzejewski, who's in your world somewhere. He's going to be acting as sort of our sergeant in arms to help us with the timing. We anticipate considerable discussion, and so we'll be conscious of the 3-minute time limit, trying to keep everybody, give everybody a chance to speak. If you missed Reverend Cook's Zoom training and you have a question about our process, you can raise your hand and we'll call on you. Raising your hand involves the react or reactions button, depending on which version of the software you're using. If you want to make sure, you're going to need it tonight, so if you want to make sure, find your react button and see where it is that you go to raise your hand. Considering participation in the meeting, if you wish to be heard, raise your hand, we'll call on you. When you hear the moderator say good evening and then your name or words to that effect, I sort of get rolling later. That will be your cue to unmute and address the body.
Just 1 second, folks. We just lost audio. The owl has restarted. So hold on 1 second.
My sound.
Hang on 1 second, folks.
But brought with them deadly diseases, with the result that the remaining islanders were all wiped out.
It's unmuted. Say something.
I'm good to go. Except I am now muted. You want me talking? The owls. Oh, yes, the owl. I apologize for all of that. For all our good planning, the owl decided, to take a look outside and see what was going on. He left us for a minute, not literally, but figuratively. And so I apologize for that. It surprised us as much as you. So we will be attempting, when we get to debate, we're going to be attempting to alternate in debate between people speaking for and against a motion. And we'll do that by having Jess Cook reach out over chat to people whose hands are raised to speak, to find out if you're planning to speak for or against, so that we can alternate. It's the fair way to do it. So be prepared for that. You can chat with Jess and he can chat with you, and the rest of the chat is disabled. I want to thank people who submitted motions in writing prior to this meeting. We are really grateful for that because it reduces the amount of data entry that has to go on to put the motions up as a poll on Zoom for display on the screen. However, please be aware that you do need to be recognized on the floor to move your item, even if you submitted in advance. If you have a motion that has not been submitted in writing, the form can be found on the POJ website. Please email it to stated clerk, STATEDCLERK, @presbyteryofthejames.org. That'll go straight to Barry, and he can put it in a place where the folks that put the polls up on Zoom can get to them right away. We like for them to be in your words if we possibly can, and not what we thought we heard you say. Mr. Stated Clerk, would you like to go over the rules for the Presbytery meeting?
Yes, moderator, the rules of the Presbytery meetings are on page 4 of your packet. I want to emphasize that please silence all of your electronic devices and do not use chat to debate a motion among yourselves. And are there any questions about the rules for the Presbytery meetings that are in your packet?
Thank you, sir.
There you
Voting procedures. Do we have anybody on the phone tonight? See that. Woo-hoo,
All
that's
right.
one step that's made easier. If somebody signs on the phone, please be sure and let me know. Otherwise, I'm gonna skip all the business about please press *9 now. Folks, if you're somebody who usually comes in on your computer, the folks on phone don't have anywhere near the capability that the rest of us do, and the only way they can communicate is raise hands. And so, that gets to be pretty interesting. I mean, we can call them if they want to speak, but, anyway, for those of you on Zoom, a poll will appear on your screen. I think, Jess went over this a little while ago, and I think they were very clear, but I'll just mention it again. Those of you wishing to, vote either yes, no, or I am not a voting commissioner. You know how all that works. Most of you are familiar with it by now. Those counts will be collected by the Zoom host and sent to the stated clerk, and he will give them to me so that I can announce the results of the vote. Mr. Stated Clerk, do we have a quorum for the evening?
We do have a quorum.
Thank you. Then I declare that we have a quorum, and I call this special meeting of the Presbytery of the James to order. That probably reverberated more than I intended. Mr. Stated Clerk, would you please open us with prayer?
Yes. Let us pray. I'm going to start with Luke chapter 14, verses 28 to 30. Listen for the word of the Lord. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay a foundation and are not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you, saying, "This person began to build and wasn't able to finish." Lord, we ask for your wisdom to guide us. Give us the discernment to overcome obstacles and the courage to face challenges head on. Bless us with your divine guidance. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. I now call on Janet James, who's out there in Zoom land, moderator of Mission Council, for the adoption of the agenda. Janet?
Good evening, moderator. The agenda can be found on page 1 of your packet. This comes from a committee, so no second is required. Therefore, the agenda is on the floor.
Are we ready to? Are there any objections to the agenda as published? Seeing none, the agenda is approved without objection. Thank you very much. Okay,
Thank you.
I now call on Walter Cantor, who is also out there in Zoom land, moderator of the nominating committee, to present his motions from the nominating committee.
Thank you, moderator. The slate that came out of our meeting last week is on the website. It's in that same bit with all the other information. So I kind of have two parts to this report. The first is the committee will put forward the slate that we have presented to you all. And then since our meeting last Tuesday, I have 5 more names of folks who have reached out to me with interest. And I would love to put their names out onto the floor. But first, on behalf of the committee, I will move the slate that has been put before you forward.
Thank you so much. I think maybe the most, that we don't need a second from that. Do people, need for us to try and put it up on screen? It'll be pretty small on screen display, but we can try it. But everybody should have been able to see it on the website. All right, we have those positions. In addition, you want to name 4 more?
I have 5 more names, and
5 more
these,
names.
but these names would need, these aren't coming from the committee. These are folks who either have filtered through committee members to my ears or have reached out to me with interest in a position and a willingness to step into roles that are currently vacant.
Let's not keep the motions separate.
Oh, okay. I just, my blessed my blessed parliamentarian just suggested that I keep the motion separate.
Thank you.
So, starting with the first set, the ones that are on the website, do we have any objections to, it doesn't require a second, it came from a committee. Do we have any comments or objections to that list of nominations from the Committee on Nominations? Hearing none, seeing none. The original distributed list from the committee is approved with no objection. Now, Walter has more nominations to bring forward.
So again, these haven't actually gone through the committee. So do they each need to be seconded in turn? Or
No, I can give all 5 of them and we'll second that as a motion by itself.
okay, then the names that I'm bringing forward come. The first is the final, the 5th spot on the Special Finance Committee, ruling elder Sam Curtin from Kirk Oak Cliff. Then on the Committee on Preparation for Ministry, for vice moderator, ruling elder Tessa Schumann from Salisbury. Her class will remain 2025. For mission and service team from Region B, our previous nominee is not able to fill the spot. However, ruling elder Stan Parcell of New Hanover is able to fill that vacancy in the class of 2027. For Mission Council, for Vice Moderator, ruling elder Jen Rowe of Fredericksburg in the class of 2025. And for Mission Council Moderator, Reverend Joel Morgan, Minister of Word and Sacrament, Member at Large for the class of 2027.
Thank you. All right, I need a second for that motion, for those names. Can I see somebody pop? Thank you very much, John Flournoy. All right, we have moved and seconded for those 5 names. Do we need to ask Walter to repeat them? We're ready to vote. All right. Does anyone object to these candidates as put forward by the chair of the Committee on Nominations? John, is your hand still up from seconding, or do you?
It is. I wasn't really seconding, but it has been our policy to have alternating ministers and ruling elders. And in the Mission Council, we're having now a minister 2 years in a row. I think that violates our procedures and administrative rules.
Janet, can you weigh in on this?
Tom Coy has a hand raised.
I see that.
John is correct. So it needs, next year, does need to be a ruling elder and then a teaching elder.
The year after that.
Josh has his hand up, and I know Josh has been working on this with Walter.
Tom Coy had his hand up before Josh did, if that's all right. Tom?
Yes, moderator. I think when it comes to nominations, this is just a point of order, that we always open the floor for other nominations.
Well, I plan to do that as soon as we get it on the,
Okay, I think we missed that on the first time around. We just simply, was there no objection? We didn't have a call for actual motion from the nominees from the floor.
I appreciate that. What I was going to do, because we have positions that are unfilled, so I was going to ask for nominations from the floor when we dispensed with the motions that came from Walter. That may be inappropriate, but that was what I was thinking.
Thank you.
Josh,
Thank you, moderator. Josh Andrzejewski, teaching elder at First Pres Richmond. Just as a clarification, that is a best practice to alternate teaching and ruling elders and to have parity. It is not a requirement in our governing documents. So just a point of information about that.
so you're saying we don't have a policy for that? Or we do have a local policy, but not one at the denomination level?
The denomination asks that we seek to balance ruling elders and ministers of word and sacrament. And of the names that I just threw out there, the vice moderator, Jin Rowe, is a ruling elder, and the proposed moderator, Joel Morgan, is a minister of word and sacrament.
But
So John's concern still stands because we'll have two ministers in a row. Janet and then Joel.
Though
Okay,
I would point out that our current moderator and vice moderator, or at least current and as of a few months ago, were both ministers of word and sacrament. So
that wasn't a good idea either.
yeah.
Point of order, it sounds like John did not second the motion, so we're debating a motion that has not yet been seconded. So I will second it so we can continue our discussions.
Thank you, Crystal, I appreciate that.
Josh has his hand raised.
Josh, your hand is up.
Yeah, I'm just trying to clarify. We do not have a requirement that the leadership of teams, committees, and commissions alternate between teaching and ruling elders. We do have a best practice or a goal for that to happen, but there are many times that does not happen. And so that's kind of a situation that we're in right now. We've approved, Commission on Ministry has been moderated by 2 teaching elders and will be moderated by a teaching elder next year. So I want to make it very clear that this is a best practice, and that concern has been raised, and the body can decide what to do about it, but it is not a requirement.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Any more comments? Are we ready to consider this? Are people comfortable handling this with just an indication of support or lack of support for these nominations? Does anyone object?
We have a poll ready, so.
What?
We have a poll ready. So. We have a poll ready.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If you
It would appear we have a poll ready. If you would prefer that, why don't we go ahead and have Jess put up his poll on these names. There we go. Yes, no, I am not a voting member. Please remember to hit submit.
Point of order.
Yes,
Laura Sugg, minister member. I thought the practice is always to call, are there any nominations from the floor? There never are, but it's one of the things that we're supposed to do before we take a vote.
all right. Fine. So yes. All right. Can we take that poll down?
And the poll.
Okay. At this point, with my apologies, do we have any nominations from the floor for these positions or any of the vacant positions? Remember, you have to have asked somebody in advance if they're willing to serve. And I think Walter needs to know what region they're from. or at least most often, for most cases. Hearing none, I'm going to assume there are no nominations from the floor, and we will proceed with approving this last set.
Would you like to relaunch the poll?
Yes, we're going to relaunch the poll now. Thank you.
We have one person on the phone.
We now have one person on the phone.
It's Cindy, so she won't be voting.
Oh, so Cindy doesn't vote. Okay, thank you. All right. We have taken down the poll. The vote is 86 in favor, 5 against. So the motion carries. Thank you very much. And thank you, Walter, for all your efforts. You have really been soldiering a lot lately, and we are grateful for it.
Thank you.
Next, I want to call on Janet James, moderator of the Mission Council, to present a motion regarding nominations for the Committee on Nominations.
Yeah, it's our, the Mission Council's responsibility to set the Committee on Nominations. So on behalf of the Mission Council, we recommend that Josh Andrzejewski be the moderator of the Committee on Nominations and Kate Fiedler be the vice moderator.
Thank you. That does come from the Mission Council. It does not require a second. Is there any discussion? John Flournoy, you have your hand up.
We're electing again 2 ministers of the Word and Sacrament to be moderator and vice moderator. We ruling elders are being left out.
John is correct.
Does that conclude your remarks, John? Okay. Tom Coy, your hand is up.
Yeah, a moderator, this is a good example of why we call for nominations from the floor when the first names have been presented. This is an ideal time that if someone knows of a ruling elder for one of the positions where we're not duplicating on ministers, this is a time to bring up that nomination for us to vote on. That's the whole idea of nominations from the floor. Is when people are nominated for a position that someone has already been nominated for, is there another person we wish to present also in competition for that position?
Sure.
Yeah.
I get that, Tom. I would submit to you that the even better process would be if you have an idea of somebody who would be a really good ruling elder, get the name to Walter Carter, so he Cantor, I'm sorry. I grew up with a Walter Carter, with Walter Cantor, so that he can follow up for the Committee on Nominations. But thank you for your input, Tom. I appreciate it. John?
I hate to keep bringing it up, but we've got a minister now, and now we're going to put a minister in as the next year and the following year, probably, since we have a vice moderator. It just seems we're not taking advantage of ruling elders at all.
Thank you for your comment. Are there any other comments? Do we have a poll for this one? All right, we're going to put up our Zoom poll. All right. On the motion from the Mission Council to name Josh Andrzejewski as the moderator and Kate Fliedner as the vice moderator of Mission Council nominating committee. The vote is 81 in favor, 10 against. It takes a simple majority, so the motion passes. Thank you very much, Janet. That concludes your business? All right.
Carson Ryan has his hand raised.
Carson, you have
Yes,
the floor.
thank you, moderator. Is it my understanding that Josh will be moderator of the Presbytery and moderator of the nominating committee?
That seems to be what's being proposed.
Wow, thank you.
All right. We are now ready to move on to the next item on the agenda, recommendations from the Budget Committee. I now call on Kerry Foster in his role as Chair of the Budget Committee to present the recommendations of the committee. He's been Chair of the Budget Committee a whole lot longer than he's been our temporary General Presbyter. So, but he will be addressing the budget that was revised after the listening sessions. Kerry, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. First off, I wish to thank the folks who did do a great and long job in preparing the budget. Our subcommittee began with Cindy Hollingfed, Chandler Easter, Cherry Peters, myself, and Flo Barbie Watkins, and Kendra Crabtree. Now, Flo and Kendra had to drop off of the last leg of the planning for various reasons. And so I'm very proud of the work that these individuals did in preparing this budget and listening to the Presbytery and talking with different committees and just fielding questions as much as they possibly could. During the two listening sessions, as people looked at our budget proposal, we had a 3-column budget that was put out to you, a reminder of the 24 budget, the 2025 requested budget, that is the input we received from the Presbytery at large. And then the work that the committee did came down to what we call the 2025 proposed budget. And then after the listening sessions and trying to apply where we could the items that were brought up, we presented then for today what we call the 2025 adjusted budget. If I could just call your attention to a couple lines to note the changes. Basically on lines 37 through 44, which would be the line items for the Commission on Ministry. We have a new set of figures that were in the first presentation, they were just carryover numbers. And the second one was actually the numbers that they had proposed, and somewhere in the way of the shuffle, we had misplaced them. But the column F on your document is the correct request from COM for this upcoming year. And you see on lines 55 through 59, the position of stated clerk is listed as it is now as a part-time position that we're proposing for the year 2025. That's in reference to concerns that perhaps the proposed budget did not fairly reflect what our expectations would be. And in conferences within the Mission Council, I'll mention as to why, but then turning over then to lines 72 through 74, you see the listing there, and that is for a temporary general presbyter, and you see the cost of that particular package. And then down on line 91, you see where we have actually listed so that people who come after us will realize that we do have an anti-racism committee and that they are a functioning entity of our presbytery. I think other than that, the budget is as presented. The Mission Council has been working on trying to move ahead for 2025. The consensus around the table is what many from the listening sessions have said, that we need to slow down and look and plan and pay more closer attention to that. To that effect, we have that one subcommittee fully elected now to begin looking at our resources. And then we have the possibilities of modifying the type of staffing model that we will have. We are trying to not repeat our staffing mistakes of the past and not trying to correct them abruptly as we have in the past, but rather to approach this in a much more methodical way, to provide times for real dialogue, to have discussions throughout the presbytery, to listen to what we believe we are and what we should be, and then to figure out how it is that we answer our call to stewardship. So with that in mind, I will be presenting then to the body column F of the report, the adjusted 2025 budget.
Thank you, Carrie. I appreciate that. Okay, the budget is on the floor. Carrie, do you have anything else to add? Okay. Before we start taking amendments, I do want to just say a couple of words. I want to commend everyone for the many emails and the great participation in the budget listening sessions. It's obvious that no one is phoning this in. The members of the POJ and the commissioners from the congregations are 100% engaged and taking the challenges of the POJ seriously with intelligence and passion. I just feel like we ought to call out the fact that people have been absolutely terrific in the amount of attention that they've paid to news. It's very common in organizations for the budget to come, everybody's eyes glaze over, and they pass basically without much examination. This is very different, and this is very healthy, and I just want to acknowledge that. At this point, I'd like to recognize Gary Charles, who's teaching elder at Cove Presbyterian, who submitted a motion in advance with his motion. Gary, are you out there somewhere?
I am. Thank you, moderator. I would like to move to postpone action on the motion before us until the stated meeting of the Presbytery of the James in February. And if I can get a second, I'd like to speak to it.
Gary needs a second. John Flournoy's hand is up. We have a second. Go ahead, Gary. Thank you.
I make this motion in recognition and in appreciation for the incredibly difficult work the Mission Council has had to do in recent months, especially without the support of executive staff. That said, while I appreciate the hard work of the Mission Council and the Budget Committee, I believe it would be a wiser and not an unusual course of action to postpone adoption of the proposed 2025 budget until the stated meeting in February, and largely for three reasons. By mid-February, we will have year-end numbers from congregational giving to the presbytery in 2024. Having this number will provide better guidance about how much congregational giving to the BOJ is reasonably projected for 2025. Second, we will have year-end numbers for the non-restricted funds that are essential to backfilling whatever deficit will be whenever the 2025 budget is finally adopted. And third, we quite possibly could have a preliminary report from the new finance team with initial guidance about income projections in the coming years and a recommendation for a faithful and effective draw off of non-restricted reserve funds going forward. For these and other reasons that are more in the weeds, I move this motion and I hope you will support it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. John Garrett, if I can ask you to wait for a minute, I see that your hand is up. We will vote on this amendment. I was going to see if I couldn't separate out people who have questions from people who want to speak for or against the amendment, because that makes it easier for us to manage the back and forth of discussing the amendment. John, do you have a question, or do you want to speak on the motion? John Garrett?
I
I have a question on the budget.
On the budget itself,
Yes,
we are.
and it can wait, it can wait.
Okay, good, because we aren't discussing the details of the budget right now. We're discussing Gary
Understood.
Charles's a motion to amend, to delay, postpone, excuse me, is the proper word. Are there any other questions? All right. Now, if someone who wishes to speak to Reverend Charles's motion, would you raise your hand now? Again, raising hands is in the react or reactions button, depending on what version of the software you have. Tom Shields, I see your hand up. You wish to speak. This is question time, not debate time.
Okay,
Tom,
I'm Tom Shields, ruling elder, Cove Presbyterian Church. Admittedly, I did this with the old budget, but I did an analysis of the budget, a time value of money analysis, and I would prefer to have better sense of what the income streams are going to be, and the expectation on the rates of return for the unrestricted funds, because my quick analysis said that we'd be back in the same position either in March of 31 or in the best possible situation, January of 34.
Tom, I don't want to be rude about this, but you're really speaking to the primary motion about the budget itself. And we're looking for questions on Gary Charles's motion to delay.
I'm supporting that delay because of the idea of getting better information to understand the impact on the budget.
Okay.
And I was supporting that by saying, if you go with the budget, the original budget, not the, I don't have all the corrections in to have done the analysis, but I did do analysis, a time value of money analysis, and it came up with those results that we would be in the similar simulation where we would be at or below the 2.3 million that we'd have to have for guaranteeing funds by the dates that I set. And so I would definitely support this to have more information to guide us in how we would go forward, so we don't repeat the issue that we had this year in our staffing.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Tom. Does anyone else wish to speak to this motion? Amy Clark, I see your hand up.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. This is one of my first meetings, and so I have to admit I'm approaching this from a stunning lack of information, and so I hope you will accept my question. Can you characterize how congregational support of the POJ meets expectations, and what can we expect in terms of increasing congregational support for the POJ if we are not meeting standards?
Amy, I feel like that question has to do with the primary motion, the budget itself and how it was put together, as opposed to Reverend Charles's motion to postpone voting on it. Am I?
Question just on, do we need to take action to influence that number that will be coming in February? So whenever we deal with it, it's just something that I feel is important to understand for those of us who aren't in the weeds. So whenever you think it's appropriate, that's fine.
Thank you. Reverend Varner Parker.
Thank you,
Crystal?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Admittedly, I am hesitant to postpone because we are just delaying the inevitable. We have some tough decisions to make with regard to the budget, and I have a great feeling that giving is not going to be greatly different than what we are projecting in this current budget. That we have a habit of trying to push the proverbial can when it comes to making a budgetary decision, and we need to make some tough decisions. I know that as a member of COM, we have, as I saw Kellyanne's hand earlier, that we have some cuts to make from our own budget to reduce some of the deficit that is proposed in this current proposed 2020 budget. So we can't keep delaying the inevitable. We have to make tough decisions. We need to move forward. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you, Reverend Barner Parker. Tom Coy, I see your hand up.
Yes. Gary has presented a possibility of delaying a decision on the budget until February. I would appreciate hearing from council, persons who have worked on the budget, as to their senses. Is it really important that we do try to adopt the budget tonight? Is there an argument for that? I'd like to hear, that point of view.
Well, we aren't all here.
Well, if someone could speak, though, I'd like to hear an argument why it'd be very helpful if we actually did decide tonight rather than delay until February.
I can offer my own opinion. I cannot speak for the Mission Council. What I do feel is that delaying the vote only complicates the next 3 to 4 months. In other words, we are saying we prefer to live in limbo. We have people who are depending upon a budget to ensure that they have employment. We have agencies that are dependent upon receiving funding. Now, while they will indeed get that funding, it is still holding something out. In 4 months' time, we may or may not have a report from our financial folks. In 4 months' time, we may or may not have this. But in 4 months' time, if we postpone, then we do have the budget dialogue continuing in the background, if not in the foreground. Sometimes you make a decision and then you move forward. This is a budget. This is not a mandate to spend this money. This is our roadmap moving forward. Like any budget, it can be amended along the way. Every budget we passed here, every budget I've ever seen, has been, for lack of a better word, our best guess. And we move forward hoping that we can own up to our obligations. Postponement, waiting for hopeful positive reports, or hoping for very negative reports that we may gut the entire place, I think is a disservice to all of us. And so I'm very, very hesitant to try and postpone what we have set out to do tonight, my opinion.
Thank you, Carrie. Janet, James, you have your hand up.
Yes, I was just going to say that we had hoped that we would put in place a temporary covenant pastor to take care of the year, and that the stated clerk, the temporary stated clerk, would remain for the rest of the year, so that we would have a year where we could kind of get some balance and try to figure out where we really are and really listen to each other. So that was our reasoning to go ahead and have, a 15th meeting this year or whatever it is. Just to try to get some time to listen and not be at each other's throat all the time. Thank you.
Samuel Curtin, you have the floor.
Okay, I'm sorry. It took me a second to unmute because
Not a problem.
I'm hurtling down the highway. So I would speak in support of the delay for 2 reasons. The first is, I think, as was noted at the very beginning of the presentation on the budget, they went into the final portions of creating this sort of hamstrung. They were they were part of the team that had worked on it, largely had fallen off. And that's a fact. That's not a discussion point. So the second part is that while I know that the bottom line of the budget as presented, at least what I read before I got in my vehicle earlier today, is that it's a negative number. And I'm afraid that if we go into it with the eye on keeping that negative number, that we are going to continue to dig faster with a bigger shovel. And simply delaying it until the finance team can look at it again, a full refresh team can look at it, may give us a better footing going into the future. Thanks, moderator.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Josh Andrzejewski, I see your hand is up. You have the floor.
Thank you, Minister of Word and Sacrament from First Richmond. What I'm responding to is the fact that this body has not had a chance to actually debate the merits of the budget as presented itself. And I feel that perhaps if we had had some debate, and I imagine there may be people who wish to make amendments, who wish to speak for certain priorities, I might feel more comfortable having heard that and being able to, take that feedback. But as it stands, if we approve this motion, we won't hear any substantive motion specific to the budget. And so I think that is, in a way, silencing folks who may wish to speak to the substance of it. I think we've kind of heard that pop up in a few of the comments. So, I don't really argue on the merits of approving tonight or delaying, but more so the argument is I would be really interested to hear more from people about the substance of the budget and where they might want to make changes.
Appreciate that, Josh. We talked about this, the parliamentarians and I and the stated clerk, and decided that rather than getting partway through the discussions of changes that people might want to the budget and that sort of thing, and then delaying it, we would just have to repeat all that effort, and then if it did get delayed, we'd have to repeat it all again. And so we decided that the most clear way to do it was to do it first. That's how we ended up where we are, and I apologize if there are negative consequences to that. I do see another hand up. Kellyanne Rail, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Kellyanne Rail, Minister Member, serving with permission out of bounds, and also your co-moderator for the Commission on Ministry. I want to speak for moving forward with the discussion of this budget, and I do so knowing that we have a negative number, but I trust our colleagues in this presbytery to work in faith together to get this budget to where it needs to be for us to all feel comfortable. Kicking the can down the road is something we do very well when we're faced with tough work. And I think we have some tough work to look at this budget holistically and see what we can do to manage expenses. And we're, as my colleague Crystal spoke to, we're ready to do the same on the commission to help with the bottom line. And lastly, I really do believe that we need an overhaul in how we market the presbytery and how our congregations support us. And I'm actively working with our temporary general presbyter on getting documents to him and other ideas from other presbyteries. And I see a light at the end of the tunnel, and we have to move forward in hope. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Rail. Carson Ryan, you have the floor.
Thank you, moderator. Couple things. One is we've had two listening sessions and people expressed their feelings about the budget, and that was well taken and I thought good conversations. Secondly, historically, we rarely have adopted next year's budget until February because we didn't know the income or expenses, and we only had the October meeting. We didn't have additional meetings. And thirdly, we don't know what the severance is and other expenses that we'll have this year. And so it seems like, as was mentioned before, we need some more information to be able to really see a good budget. And so I just give that as historic background, interim pastor at Summit Church and honorably retired pastor. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Reverend Ryan. I am not seeing any more hands up on action requesting to comment or discuss the motion to refer the vote to February. Are we ready to take a poll? David Forney, I see your name up.
Good evening, everybody. David Forney, pastor, First Presbyterian Church, Charlottesville. Appreciate all the good work that's been done in the conversation tonight. I'm one of the members, going to be one of the members of the special team to talk about the finances that's going to be beginning. And I will be voting to postpone the adoption of the budget tonight because I think we do need more information in a lot of different aspects as we think about the way in which our presbytery is going to move forward. I am one who does not like to kick the can down the road. However, it seems to me that the presbytery is going to continue to do its same work that it's currently doing between now and February. So it's not like things are going to stop between now and then. We will continue to pay our bills. We'll continue to pay our employees. We'll continue to try and do this good work that God has for us. So more information about what we might need to do will be evident. I too do not believe there's probably more income to be realized over that period. My concern is that congregational giving might continue its 6-year trend to continue to go down, and that the budget could be even more stressed than it's appearing in this revised budget. I do deeply appreciate the revised budget and the great work that went into that. So this postponement is, in my mind, no dig on that good work, but I'll be voting to postpone. Thanks.
Thank you. Laura Sugg, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Laura Sugg, minister member, pastor of South Plains Presbyterian Church. I really have a question for clarification, and I think Reverend Forney addressed it by saying that when you highlighted that we wanted a year of our interim or bridge and the stated clerk to remain, that is still possible even if we don't approve a budget this evening. We don't have to, we will be without a staff member through February. Am I correct that we can still have that pattern without approving the budget this evening? Is that fair to say?
I believe it is fair to say, yes.
Right.
Janet? Thank you so much. Reverend James?
So one of the important things that we thought about the budget was that we have made a decision as a presbytery that we did not have enough money to fund the 2 positions that we ended up having people let go from. And we thought it was important to go ahead and show that decrease in the budget as soon as possible, so that it was that we were reacting or acting on what the presbytery had decided. Therefore, the budget is changed and there is a reduction in expenses. And it kind of follows then that people lose their job, and then that there was a severance, and you know, all that progression makes sense related to the budget. Yeah, thank you.
I don't see any more hands. Are we ready to put up a poll? Oh, Joel and Noah Morgan. Hi, guys.
Good evening, everybody. Joel Morgan, minister member at large. I'm super confused about why we would delay going ahead and approving a budget when we can amend this budget at any time at a called meeting after whatever committee makes their decision. I'm just not confident that in 3 months, a committee of 5 is going to come with such, world-changing recommendations that we're going to have a whiz-bang budget that is balanced, that we couldn't wait, that we couldn't just revise in March, and go through the process now of getting this done and having the discussion and making some hard decisions on this budget at this time, at this called meeting, rather than waiting for some magical information that's going to come. I guess I go back to my father, who died this summer, just to guilt some people because I'm going to talk about him a little bit, who said, you've got to make the decision with the information you have. And then if you make a wrong decision, you make another decision. And eventually you'll make a right one. So I feel like we need to make a decision as a presbytery tonight on this budget to approve some sort of budget to move forward, and then let that committee get to work and let the rest of us get to work and let our staff get to work, so that then if we need to make a change in March or February or whatever, that can be brought back to us. Well, I guess that would be by that committee and then by the group that I'm supposedly going to be the moderator of now. So that's what I'm stepping into, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Morgan. No more hands? All right, we are ready to move to a vote. So our host will be putting up a poll on postponing consideration of the budget until our February stated meeting. Sure. This is a don't leave home without it situation.
Is everyone voting?
Has everyone voted?
Has everyone voted? All right, thank you. All right, this is the motion to postpone consideration of the budget to the February meeting. In favor, 43, opposed 49. The motion fails. Thank you, everyone. Okay, now we are back to the base motion as of the budget as presented. And so I want to do the same thing we did before, take questions first, rather than forcing people to frame a question as for or against. And then we will take debate, if that sounds all right with everybody. The hands are kind of moving around a little bit, but at the moment. Dan Jordinger, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, moderator. I have a question about the process. I understood that Reverend Kerry Foster made the motion on his own, and I did not hear a second. So I want to make sure
He
that
did
we
not.
are
He was speaking-
procedurally proper here.
He is speaking for the budget committee, and therefore it came from a committee and no second was required.
Okay, I didn't hear that. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you for asking, because I never am absolutely 100% sure I did things right. All right, John Garrett, you are next in line, sir. You have a question.
There we go. I just have one question. I think this goes to Carrie about the adjusted budget. Is there, and I hope there is, some money for the small church reimbursement for capital outlay?
Don, the money for that has come from a different asset. It wasn't a line item on the budget. It was using the proceeds from one of the churches that we currently hold. It was the income off of the Montrose Church. So it never really showed up in the budget. It was I'm told not to use the word another set of books, but it was from a different area that wasn't involved in the budgetary expenses, the daily expenses.
Operating expenses.
Operating expenses.
So yes.
If I may paraphrase, there is money, but it's not in the budget.
No. There is money and it can be spent, but it's not that is not an operating expense. It's a grant process.
Okay. If one follow-up, how could someone find out how much money there may be or is?
I'm right off the top of my head, I don't know. We have a thing that we produce every year and it shows up in our audit called the balance sheet. And the balance sheet shows the balance of the Montrose Fund and all the others. And it's usually updated monthly, but I don't recall that it was that information was included in the final version of the budget that was distributed. Carrie, do you have a recent number for Montrose Fund?
An almost recent number.
Almost.
It comes from the report that's in every Presbytery meeting. It's labeled POJ net assets without restrictions. And it's from the Montrose, the print here is kind of small, but from the Montrose Church. So every time we have a Presbytery meeting with a financial report, those assets are in the packet. And they have been since my time here in the Presbytery. So you want to look for it says POJ net assets without restrictions, and then go down to the Montrose Church line item and you'll see. And I can't read.
Does that come from the trustees?
No, it comes in the packet for every stated meeting.
Where in the packet?
Yes,
I'll
the
just ask
trustees.
the obvious.
Oh, it's in the trustee report. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I'll look for it.
Yeah, usually, John, it's right after the budget, the actual budget report that Cindy provides our operating expenses, then should be the 1 or 2 pages right after that, but they're grouped all together.
Okay. Thank you all. I appreciate your patience.
Thank you, sir. Dave Toman, you have a question?
Yes, Madam Moderator, ruling Elder Dave Thoman from Summit Presbyterian Church. It was my understanding that several years ago when Camp Hanover became its own separate entity, that the Presbytery committed to providing financial support to Camp Hanover for several years until it got on its feet. My understanding also is that that commitment was to end in 2024. So my question is why in line 116 of the budget, it appears that we still have a commitment to Camp Hanover?
I cannot personally answer that. Dan, maybe? Dan Jordanger?
Or would Cindy Hollinshead be able to?
Cindy is on the line. She's on the call. Cindy, are you there? Cindy Hollingshead is our financial manager.
Isn't she on the phone then?
Hi,
What?
hi, hi, I'm
Oh,
here.
she's on the phone, that's right. Go ahead,
Hi.
Cindy.
Hi, I'm sorry, I was not able to, join Zoom, so I'm having to call in. The agreement, to answer your question, the agreement was through 2024. And in small print of that agreement, or in the print of that agreement, it states that they would reconsider after 2024 moving forward. There would be consideration given at that time. And I use the word negotiate because that doesn't sound correct in this type of relationship, but there was an understanding that it would be revisited. But as far as, completing the agreement at the time, completing the obligation to Camp Hanover at the time, you are correct that it would end in 2024. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
I am going to jump the line a little bit because Kate Fiedler has her hand up and she is currently on the board of Camp Hanover. So Kate, can you weigh in?
So actually, I just rotated off the board, but can speak to the fact that there is a group of Camp Hanover board members who are currently working with a group in Presbytery of the James to create a new partnership and to think about what the needs of camp are and the ways in which the Presbytery of the James can continue to support the youth and children's ministry and also collegiate ministry with their staff. And so, David, I'm grateful for your question. I hope that that would be one thing that we consider when we think about this budget that is before us, of how the Presbytery wants to commit and hopes to continue to support the excellent ministry that Camp Hanover currently does, particularly given that there is no longer funding to support youth ministry within the Presbytery, or it's certainly not a staff person like there used to be. So thank you, Cherry, for letting me speak to that. There may be other members of Camp Hanover's board who would like to speak to that as well.
Lack of any better information, I'm going to go ahead and call on Alex Krieger, who I think is next in line.
You're muted.
Hi, Alex Krieger, pastor at Bon Air Presbyterian Church. And my question is actually about the general presbyter line item in the amended budget. I noticed along with the full number that it had some notes at the bottom that I was just curious to hear more about. It sort of said like it was both as a covenant position and a retired position. And I didn't know if we made any firm decisions on like what that position is going to be or who it will be, but I was very confused by that. I liked the overall numbers for it, but was if there can be more detail with that.
You want to take that, Karen? Pardon?
Janet, chair, moderator chair.
Okay.
I mean, the mission council chair.
Janet?
Yes, I'm here. Yes.
Can you speak to that?
Yes. So Alex, the Mission Council has direction according to what the Presbytery, the task force, what it recommended, that we do whatever we need to do to begin to move toward what was recommended and voted on. And so what we decided is that since Carrie had been a part of this process and decision-making, that we would just put him in. It's not a called position. It's just a temporary holding pattern with somebody who has some experience. And Carrie happens to be retired or retiring, so we don't have to pay a lot of his benefit package. So that's the reason we had Carrie in that position. And he has experience as a stated clerk in the Shenandoah Presbytery. So it was just a good way for us to keep some of the knowledge about the budget, about what the staffing, about what had happened, so that as we move forward, we don't have to reintroduce to someone all that's going on. Thanks
Thank
for
you, Jan.
asking.
Joel and/or Noah Morgan, you have the floor.
Thank you, moderator. Noah Morgan, teaching elder at the Hebron Church. I had a question regarding the denominational connection section of the budget, specifically the per capitas, and even more specifically, synod per capita. So I was wondering if somebody could speak to our responsibilities towards the synod and towards the GA in terms of per capita, since there seems to be nothing in the Book of Order about requirements from the presbytery to pay towards synod and GA, and couching this in the larger question of, may this be the time for this next year, as the chair of Mission Council said, to get on our feet a little bit to get some stability, if this might be a time when we might abstain from giving a per capita to get back on our feet. So I wonder if somebody could speak to our responsibility to pay these per capita, and if this might be a time to step away from that, reconsider at a later date, so that we can gain some better stability financially. Thank you.
Interesting. Janet, you want to speak to that? I'm in kind of a conflicted position on that, so I'm going to toss the ball to Janet.
I think it's very innovative, Noah, that you mentioned that, and none of us had the courage to consider it. So we did not talk about decreasing that, but that certainly could be something brought up.
And I will just say I'm conflicted about it because I serve as a commissioner to the synod and chair their finance committee, so.
If I might add, I didn't read the latest edition of the Book of Order. I'll admit to that up front. However, one of the things in this connectional system that we have, when it comes to the per capita or the supporting of the different levels, congregations can opt out of supporting the presbyteries. But essentially, presbyteries are not allowed, unless things have changed in the last few years, to opt out of supporting the mid-count, the other councils, synod and the GA. And again, going a little bit on memory, and a more current polity one could tell, but I've always operated on the assumption and that the per capita as far as GA and synods are mandated. As far as I know, and we can look, I mean, yeah, it would be great to look into that. And I'm not, I've not looked any further than working on what I just told you. So I've just always taken it as a given. But the question is well worth being looked into.
Moderator?
Yes, sir.
G,
Carson, do you want to specifically speak to not sending money to the
G 3.0106, presbyteries have to pay it to synod and general assembly. Congregations do not have to pay it to presbyteries.
Moderator,
excuse me a second.
may I speak?
Yes, Franklin, just speak up and you'll show up on camera.
Franklin Redding, minister, retired. I think it's a good idea to ask whether, to what extent we are obligated as a presbytery to support the synod and the general assembly. My memory agrees with what Carson has said, that I think we are obligated, but there's another consideration that might be important to weigh. That is that as the presbytery, we model for our congregations, our sessions, what is involved in being part of a connectional church. We ask the sessions to budget support for the presbytery. And as Carson said, we can't compel that. But the Senate and the General Assembly are asking their presbyteries to support them in turn. And I think it does well if we model for our sessions that we think that's an important thing to do.
Thank you. Leslie Scheimer, you have your hand up? You have a question?
Yes, thank you. Leslie Scheimer, I'm an ruling elder from Tuckahoe Church. One comment to make about this question with the per capita, and it goes a little bit to having updated information as we make budget decisions. I would ask if we're looking at, if it's even on the table at all, are our numbers, are our per capita numbers really up to date from our different congregations, so that what we're putting in here is really good data? You know, I just don't know how often that gets updated, or is this just kind of a plug number from year to year? Also related to information on when we're getting, there were some comments about we'll know at some point what the severance number it is. We'll know at some point a better figure about the value of the, I guess it's Church and Mission Development Fund. As that information comes available, what would be the process, or who would be the people that would then look at the budget, assuming we adopt this adjusted budget? What would be the process for someone to say, wait a minute, we now have updated data, and there was a comment made, we can amend a budget at any time, but I don't know how that impetus or momentum, how would that even begin if new data came up in February, March, or April that really made some people say, wait, we don't have a good budget now because we have better data. I don't know the process for that.
Janet, since I think that's the Mission Council, do you want to respond to that one?
Well, the budget council would be all over that right away. You can imagine. The thing about our per capita that you mentioned, Leslie, all of us turn in from each church how many members we have. And so if our rolls are clean, you know, then that's the best thing we can do. And then I am very serious. Every time we meet, and we meet monthly, the Mission Council, we look at the numbers. So as soon as we get information, we would love to change. We would love to be the Mission Council that flipped the, you know, the whole thing. So those people, but you are welcome. You are welcome when you see something to say something. We are available. So please do that. Let Joel Morgan know next year. Let Carrie Foster know. Let people know. Let Chandra Easterly know that you want to, you know, what's going on. So thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Amy Clark, your next question. You have a question?
This is actually more of a comment and a question. I'm Amy Clark, treasurer at Ginter Park Presbyterian Church, and being on the ground in the budgeting in a local congregation, I can tell you there are no financial windfalls that are going to come that would significantly change what we can commit to the presbytery. We do pay our per capita amount that is given to us by the presbytery, but if as a presbytery we're getting 70% or 60% of our per capita from our churches, we have to keep in mind what we can afford to pay in terms of support. Not supporting, but it seems like it would be worthwhile looking at the per capita that we take in from our congregations and what we give to the Senate and the presbytery, if there is any ability to look at those numbers and make them what we can afford to pay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Judy Blair, you have a question?
Yes, I do. Judy Blair, Rural Yeller, First Res, Charlottesville. What happens if we do not approve this budget?
Oh, we'll have it back in front of you again in February because we will have to have a budget. I am only speculating, but I would think we'll have more listening sessions and try again.
Okay, thank you, Madam Moderator.
Reverend Mapes, Gordon Mapes, I think you're next. If you have a question.
More of a point of information, Madam Moderator. Gordon Mapes, teaching elder, Chester. Before we go too far down this rabbit hole, unless it's changed in the last week, the Presbytery of the James does not assess a per capita for its congregations.
That, to the best of my knowledge, that is still true. We do invite congregations to give and to let us know what they're going, what they plan to give. I don't see any more hands at this point for questions. So, oh,
Tom Shields.
Tom Shields again.
Colleen Earth.
Okay. Tom,
Yeah. Tom Shields, ruling elder, Cove Presbyterian Church. I guess it's a question, I guess. With the revised budget, I'm presuming, and I guess I'm looking for an affirmation that the Presbytery is not going to make a decision on hiring to a full-time position during the next year's budget until they have better understanding of what their cash flows are. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
thank you. Laura Sugg, question?
Yes, question. Minister member, pastor of South Plains Presbyterian Church, Laura Sugg. It's about collegiate ministries, which is near and dear to my heart. And I know that all kinds of painful decisions were made to advance this adjusted budget. And I get that. I'm wondering, just as the question earlier about small churches and other grant possibilities that are outside the operating budget, was there a conversation? Because that was slashed 50%. And again, the present and the future of our church is this next generation. So I wondered, are there sources of funding that haven't yet been tapped beyond the operating budget that might offset this reduction of 50% for collegiate ministries for 2025 in the adjusted budget? Thank you.
Harry, can you handle that?
My first reading, and this is not because I don't have all the backgrounds for different accounts, if by chance there are, it's going to be small. Several years ago, Kenna presented to Mission Council a breakdown of each of the funds that are listed and the assets, how they came about and their uses and all. I don't recall, I'm going back of memory, one that was specifically meant to support campus ministry. But yeah, especially with the group being assembled, all that data is for them to also digest. But I'm just not aware of any of our restricted or unrestricted assets that are aimed toward college ministry.
I think
Yeah, and to
Cindy-
follow up, I wasn't necessarily asking about ones that were designated for college ministry, just a pocket of money somewhere that might be a feeder for offsetting the cost. Sorry.
I think I'm gonna ask our financial manager if she can take a whack at that question as well. Cindy, are you still on the phone?
To answer your question, no, the only two funds now, hello?
Yes.
The only two funds, oh, I'm sorry, I'm right in the middle of a very low cell reception area. The only two funds right now that Mission Council or the Presbytery has given approval are the two funds that are in question, the CMD fund and the Genesis and Generations fund. So to answer your question, is there another pocket of money? Not at this time, unless the Presbytery deems to change the funds without restrictions to open it up for other uses. So I know that's a roundabout way of answering your question, but at this time, it's only the two funds that have been given approval to use.
Thank you, Cindy. Barclay Bradshaw, I see your hand up. Do you have a question?
Thank you. Yes, I do. Barclay Bradshaw, ruling elder, 3 Chop, Richmond. What is the projected loss of the POJ for 2024?
The
projected loss, we're 10 months into the year. I'm sure there's some feel for where the number will end up for 2024.
I'm sorry, you're talking about the loss on our investments?
No, the loss of the POJ's operating account.
So the operating deficit, is that what you're asking about?
Yes, the projection is $779,000 loss. What is the actual projected to be?
Oh, for 2024.
Oh, for 2024?
For 2024, the current year.
Hang on one second. Carrie is flipping madly through pages. Oh, you can see that.
This is really a rough guess. The projected was 770.
The budgeted was 770.
Yeah, the budgeted or the support rendered from different accounts amounted to $770,000. It looks like we're on, and I'm using 2 months short of a year. Around my guess, and please take it as a guess, is at 615,000, the drawdown.
And does that include the severance or not in that projection?
I've not seen the final severance figure, so my assumption is that doesn't show, and that would show up in the budget item anyway. That would be showing up in the restricted asset, one of the 2 restricted assets funds. But I've not seen the final tally for the severances.
Does the POJ make projections during the year as the year goes on?
No, I would say not. Well, I mean, I won't speak for what Cindy does, but we watch our expense levels and how they're trending. We don't make formal projections. We don't go back and double check assumptions and things like that the way you would if you were a financial institution.
I understand, but
we do watch
I know one local church that does. So I'm a little disappointed the POJ doesn't get that information. The budget team doesn't get that information when they meet. But those are my questions, so I appreciate the time.
This is Cindy. May I jump in here? I'm sorry. I just want to add some information to that question. To answer your question, as far as what I am looking at, it's hard to tell you because until the churches at year end have completed their covenants to the presbytery, I can't tell you or project what the income will end. Right now, we are tracking about where we do every year at this point in time. And right now, currently, we are sending letters to all congregations reminding them of their intents, their pledges to the presbytery, and what they've given thus far. And as far as expenses and projecting those out, if you look at the budget to actual line items in the POJ operating budget, we do track this very, very carefully. And so project where we're going to be at year end, if those different committees do not spend what they have asked for in the year, well, then again, we don't carry funds forward. So that would be a positive back to the presbytery. We are now, at the end of November. So I do believe that there will be some expenses not put in for the year. So I can kind of have a really rough guesstimate on where we might fall in expenses, but the income is still the question. Are we going to have any surprises? Will there be any church at the end that doesn't pay their covenant? So yes, I did want to jump in and say we do track it very carefully every month, and every month we're looking at the income, we're looking at the expenses, and right now we are tracking almost to the percent where we are every year at this point in time. Does that give you a little more clarification?
Thank you, Cindy. I appreciate the input. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
David Pettit, and then
I know.
Does that help?
Thank you.
Wordy.
David Pettit, you have a question? And then we're going to, we really need to start moving on to approving motions to amend if they're going to come. David Pettit, you're on the floor.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. David Pettit, ruling elder, First Presbyterian, Charlottesville. My question is, how is projected income on the Presbytery's investments reflected in this budget?
We don't really do that on the budget. Again, it's on the balance sheet. But what we talk about in terms of the budget is what we plan to draw from the investments to support our activities. We don't try to estimate what the income will be and pitch the draw to anticipated revenue. Did that make sense?
Well, honestly, I'm not sure it does. I understand what you're saying, but it seems to me it would be important to try to have a projection of the revenue that might be expected, given that there's an anticipated, in round numbers, $600,000 deficit. That's a pretty emergent situation.
This is Cindy again. May I jump in again? I'm sorry, I can't raise my hand. I don't have access to that. Let me answer your question. In 2023, or February of 2024, when this budget was passed, it was predetermined the funds that would be used as a draw. Only those dollar amounts could be used. So while we are and do track the increases and changes in the investment portfolio, this budget is based on a predetermined amount that could be spent based on line items.
That's the question.
Does that answer your question?
That is helpful, but let me ask what may be a stupid question. How do we fund the shortfall in the budget, the deficit in the budget?
I'm sorry, ask that
Well,
again.
The question is,
shortfall.
If we have a deficit in the budget, where does the money come from to pay those bills?
It was predetermined to use the funds from the Church and Ministries Development Fund and the Genesis and Generations Fund. When they looked at what was put in the budget, the deficit at that point in time was to use that amount to draw against. That's why it was at $770,000. So it wasn't taking into account the gains or losses. It was just a predetermined amount that was already put in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dan Jordinger, you have the floor.
Thank you, moderator. I wanted to briefly follow up on Cindy's comment in response to David's question. The Presbytery trustees have an investment committee that meets at least quarterly with our investment advisors, with RBC Wealth Management. We receive at least quarterly reports from RBC on how our investments are performing. I can say that over the last 10 years, we have had an average return on investments of 6% through September 30th for calendar 2024. Our return for the 9-month period was just over 7%. I have talked with the Mission Council about, well, we've had conversations as a presbytery about a 5% draw being appropriate. I have suggested in conversations with Mission Council that 6% might be appropriate because that's our average return over an extended period of time. These are decisions for the presbytery ultimately to make, but I just wanted to share some of that information about how our investments are overseen and what the average return has been over the last decade.
Thank you, Dan. I don't see any hands up, and I really am getting concerned about the time. So I would like to, if we can, move to the approval or amendment of the motion that we have on the floor, which is the original motion. So at this point, we will be speaking, we will need your help to identify whether you're speaking for or against the motion or moving to amend. So those are the choices.
Joel and Noah Morgan.
Yeah, I see. All right, Morgan's, gentlemen, you have a hand up.
Noah.
Noah Morgan, teaching elder at the Hebron Church. I would like to move to amend. I sent the email to the stated clerk, and my motion reads as follows. Move that we reduce line items 6 and 7, which are the Senate and GA per capita, by half, respectively. So the Senate contribution would then equal $8,300, and the GA contribution would equal $78,237.50. And if someone would second, I can speak to it.
I don't want to get confused about, can I get someone in the room to second that? So we've got hands up. Okay. We have a second for that in the room. Thank you. Speak to it. No, please, Noah.
Yes. So
you have it in writing?
Yes.
Okay.
Recognizing what has been said before when I asked about the per capita and our responsibility, and being directed to the Book of Order to G30106, the portion of the Book of Order doesn't require a per capita. It just says that it may be fulfilled by a per capita. So on the one hand, we have the ability to amend it as we will. If we amended it, we would be saving over $86,000 in the budget this year. And I don't say this as wanting to diminish the connectionalism within our denomination, but to say that there are lean years and there are years of abundance. And for us now, in terms of our giving to the GA and to the Senate, they may need to be leaner if we are to get back on our feet and to do the mission of supporting our congregations this year and moving forward. So I would put this motion before the body.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We have a seconded motion on the floor. Colleen Earp, your hand is up. Please identify yourself and then whether you're speaking for or against.
Colleen lowered her hand.
Pardon me?
She lowered her hand. Karen Allen.
Oh, okay. Karen Alleman. Same thing.
Muted.
You're muted.
My hand, Colleen Earp, Minister Member, Massanetta Springs. My hand was up to make a different motion, so I don't know the best practice for holding my spot on Zoom for once we finish with the proper procedure for this motion.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I think I'm unmuted.
You are.
Okay, Karen Alleman, teaching elder at Madison. I'd like to speak against the motion, and the only reason is that there was just a big article in the Presbyterian Outlook and carried by the news services of how much GA has had to cut their budget already, and that they're severing staff. They're making big cuts like we are, and I think that as we are a connectional church, we need to take that into consideration, so I'm speaking against the motion.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Karen. Laura Sugg.
Laura Sugg, Minister Member, South Plains Pastor. I echo what she just said. I would vote against this. We are a connectional church and we need to stay connectional and support the GA and Synod.
Do I have someone who would speak in favor of the motion? Tom, we don't have a whole lot of hands up. Tom, why don't you take the floor? Tom Coy.
Moderator Tom Coy at Campbell Church and Milton Church, teaching elder. I think this motion is out of order. As I read the Book of Order, presbyteries are responsible to respond to the Synod and General Assembly assessments. I don't think we have a choice on this one. I think presbyteries have to do that. So I don't know how to call for a ruling from the stated clerk on this, but I think the motion to play fast and loose with the per capita on our part in this case is not in order.
Speak to that with the moderator's permission.
Please.
I'm speaking both as the temporary stated clerk of the Presbyterian James and also as the Synod, as the moderator of the Synod of Mid-Atlantic. And I can assure everybody that you are obliged to pay this amount. There is no question about it. Thank you.
Noah has his hand raised.
I see that Noah has his hand. Yeah, we don't have, oh, right. Noah, Morgan, you have the floor.
Yes, hearing from the honorable members, I hear that, and I would ask that since it says in that section of the Book of Order that each council may fund it with a per capita apportionment, not shall pay with a per capita apportionment. Again, this is not about not supporting the denomination or the Synod, but saying that for this year, we need to have the funds to get back on our feet. And if we can save $86,537.50 by just having, just in half, our giving for this year, which we can reconsider at any time, I don't see any cause for that. If I'm misreading it and the may is a shall, that's a different issue, but that's how I see.
Yeah, we have a motion on the floor. I don't see any other hands up. So I think it's time to vote on this amendment. Pardon me?
A motion to close the debate requires a 2/3 majority. We'd have to pass that motion first before we vote on.
Even though we don't have anybody who wants to say anything?
Do we know that for sure?
There are no hands up.
Well, then I would feel more comfortable if we don't immediately go to a vote on the amendment once somebody calls for the question. The 2/3 majority is quite important in Robert's rules, so it will only take 30 seconds. That's my recommendation, but it's up to you, moderator.
Close the debate.
Pardon me?
Whether or not to close the debate, is that the question?
To call the question on the amendment. All right, we're going to put a poll up. I see now 2 hands up. And down again. We're going to put a poll up on.
To call the question.
To call the question. This is calling the question on the amendment that is before us, not on the base motion to approve the budget. This is amending that budget. Can you see, do people seem to have responded? Are we done?
Yes, we're done. 79, yeah. Eighty-one, yes. 3 now.
81 to 3.
All right, so the move to close the discussion, is 81 in favor, 3 opposed. So, the question is now called and we are voting on the motion itself. So there's the poll because Jess is really on top of things for us.
Gordon Mapes has a hand raised.
Gordon, you have your hand raised. Do you have a question?
I do not. I have another amendment after you're done with this vote.
Okay.
Colleen
thank you.
Earp is first.
Pardon me?
Colleen is first.
Yeah, I lowered my hand earlier.
The amendment to change the budget, there were 29 votes in favor and 62 votes against. The motion fails. Thank you. Gordon Mapes, you have another amendment?
Colleen Earp was ahead of Gordon earlier, but lowered her hand. So actually Colleen should be first. Like Colleen was before Gordon.
So I should, hang on one second, so I should call on Colleen first?
Colleen is first and then Gordon.
Okay, forgive me, Gordon, apparently Colleen's hand was up earlier and she lowered it, and I didn't make a note of it. Colleen, do you have a motion? Or
Yes.
something to say about the motion on the floor?
I have a motion, an amendment I'd like to move.
Okay,
Colleen Earp, Minister Member at Massanettes Springs, and I'd like to amend the original motion. I've submitted this ahead of time, as we were asked to. Moderator, I move to adjust the amount given to the Ministry of Camp Hanover to $102,000, the difference to be taken from the Church Development and Ministries Fund. For reference, Camp Hanover is line 116, and the Church Development and Ministries Fund is listed at $4,159,407 in the report from our September 26th called meeting. If I get a second, I'd be glad to speak to the motion.
Second, and I'd like to respond to the motion.
Gordon, do you want to speak to Colleen's motion, or are you holding your place in line? Because I've got you for the next motion.
Glad to know you've got me. I was as confused as Colleen earlier about the process for getting in line. So
Well,
I
I've got you in line next. Okay. Is there anyone, we have so Colleen, would you like to speak?
I would, thank you. Friends, the Presbytery of the James has brought up many strong leaders in our denomination, many growing up at Camp Hanover and participating in youth ministry programs in our congregations and at the presbytery level, some of whom are in this room tonight. This partnership has been strong for almost 70 years. In July of 2019, Camp Hanover Incorporated, a move many Presbyterian camp and conference centers have made in recent years to offer mutual financial protection for the camp and the presbytery or synod it operates in. In Camp Hanover's case, a covenant was developed intending to remain close ministry partners with the Presbytery of the James. This included, but was not limited to, support of $126,000 in the first year to decrease a gradual $6,000 a year to keep camp on a steady and sustainable path. While the Presbytery offered this funding, camp provided programs for older adult ministries, women's retreats, youth programs, as well as free space for pastors to take Sabbath, and a lot of other ministry support and opportunities in addition to summer camps and retreats. I would know this as a former staff member offering some of that support, as well as a member of this presbytery continuing to receive some of that report. And if you have questions about this arrangement, Doug Walters is here and is a corresponding member of the presbytery with voice to tell you more about that covenant arrangement. Perhaps I'm biased as someone who continues her ministry in a camp and conference setting, but I think many of our colleagues in this Zoom room and well beyond can speak to the ways outdoor ministry has shaped their faith, their capacity as leaders, and their sense of call to professional ministry, as well as many other kinds of involvement in the church. In 2020, we eliminated youth ministry at the presbytery level when about 24 youth were participating in youth council, and we had just sent a presbytery delegation of 24 plus quite a few adult volunteers to Triennium the year before. Most of these young leaders did not have youth programs in their home congregations, but grew in discipleship and leadership through these experiences through Camp Hanover. Many of those youth have gone on to serve as Pathfinders, the leadership training program at Camp Hanover, as well as on summer staff, in addition to many young leaders who come up through Camp Hanover having never been churched at all. Church is alive and well at Camp Hanover. I'm concerned that we're working ourselves toward being a presbytery focused on our institutional maintenance, when our mission is to support leaders, congregations, and ministries in growing followers of Jesus Christ who joyfully live out God's mission in the world. I know we're scared about the future. I know we're worried about funding, but personally, I don't see much a point of hoarding our money for a future for which we haven't supported our young people to step up and take over. And we've already significantly limited the ways we are supporting youth in this presbytery. So I hope that as a body, we can support bringing the funding to Camp Hanover back to the level of $102,000. Thank you, moderator.
Donald, 3 minutes. Good job. Colleen, thank you. Crystal Varner Parker, your hand.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Crystal Varner Parker, Minister Member serving the Providence Forge Church in New Kent, Virginia. I'd like to speak in favor of this motion as I attended one of the budget listening sessions and shared that we are a denomination that sees ourselves continually dwindling in membership. And if we want to ensure our future viability, we have to invest in programs that affect our children and our youth. And Camp Hanover is one of these ministries that is doing this well. I speak to you as a mother who has had 2 children benefit from time at Camp Hanover. I speak to you as a pastor who has had children within my congregation benefit from the programming of Camp Hanover. And I speak to you as someone who has served and supported Camp Hanover and know the good work that they are doing to connect children and youth and far beyond the walls of the Presbyterian Church. Most recently, when I was there preaching for their board retreat, there were students from VCU there for a retreat from one of the programs at VCU. I have taken my own Girl Scout troop to Camp Hanover and have children beyond the Presbyterian Church in love with what Camp Hanover is doing. We are shooting ourselves in the proverbial foot if we continue to cut funding in the ways that this budget proposes. We must increase the funding in this budget for Camp Hanover for the future of not only our church, but what the work it is doing in the community. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you, Crystal. David Toman.
Madam Moderator, Dave Thoman from the Summit Presbyterian Church Ruling Elder. I'm going to have to speak against this motion. Again, back in 2017, when Camp Hanover, the move was to make Camp Hanover stand on its own feet, the Presbytery invested a huge amount of money in helping bring Camp Hanover up, fix things that needed to be fixed. And then the agreement was that we would support it through 2024 with a decreasing amount. My understanding, Camp Hanover is on sound footing. Now, I'm encouraged with Kate's comments earlier that we're discussing new partnerships with Camp Hanover, but those discussions are still underway. Let us bring it down, sever the commitment as it was supposed to be in 2024, and let's have those discussions and find out what is needed. But to arbitrarily take it back up to 106,000 is just arbitrary.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. Dan, I'm going to hold you up for a minute, this as a point of order. I'm very concerned that it's 5 minutes of 9 and we have much to do. we had advertised this meeting as ending at 9. Is there a general sense of the meeting that we would like to go ahead and stay with it and finish this evening? If people seem to be in favor of that, I would entertain a motion. As soon as we finish with the Camp Hanover motion, I would entertain a motion to extend the meeting a half hour so we can finish our work. So keep that in mind. I'm concerned about the time. Dan?
A motion to fix the time to adjourn has precedence over a motion to amend. So we could.
Even though it's on the floor already?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm being advised that we can go ahead and handle a motion to extend the time on the meeting. So if it's all right, I know that Dan Jordan is next. Jordinger is next. But I will entertain a motion to extend the meeting
30 minutes. 30 minutes?
30 minutes. Hey, I assume that Dan, since your hands were already up, that neither Lynn nor Dan is making that motion, or is somebody planning? Dan?
Moderator, I'm happy to make that motion.
Oh, thank you. All right.
Second.
Excellent, thank you. All right. Does anyone object to extending the meeting time another 30 minutes? Seeing none, the motion passes.
Oh, wait, you don't need a poll.
We don't need a poll. The motion passes without objection. Thank you very much. Now, back to Dan Jordinger, because he was next in the queue.
Thank you, moderator. I apologize. I didn't introduce myself earlier. Dan Jordanger, ruling elder, Providence Gum Spring Church, president of trustees of the Presbytery of the James. 3 quick pieces of information just to share for the body. First, the 2019 covenant agreement says, and I'm reading, the parties may amend this agreement at any time in accordance with Virginia law. And we also agreed that we would renegotiate. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong term. We said we would, sorry, following the conclusion of year 4, we may reaffirm and renew this agreement and any addendum thereto. So that's the terms of the agreement. We said we would address and consider reaffirming and renewing. Second, the trustees on behalf of the Presbytery and the camp have been discussing terms of a renewed covenant agreement. The negotiating teams have reached agreement on the language of that covenant agreement. The only open item is the amount of any contributions by the Presbytery to the camp, which is, of course, the topic we are discussing here. Third, in the 2024 budget for the Presbytery, the commitment to the camp was $102,000. Colleen's motion is to leave that number for 2025 at $102,000. If we reduced it $500 a month or $6,000, that would take us to 96. That would be consistent with our past practice. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you, Dan. Lynn Clements, you very patiently waited and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Lynn Clements, Associate Pastor, Westminster, Charlottesville. I wanted to speak for this motion. Like others, I am grateful for the ministry that Camp Hanover offers youth, young adults, pastors, and members of the community. Their work has been transformative in the lives of young people. I attended one of the listening sessions during which lots of folks spoke with regard to the Presbytery's budget, which provided no support for youth or youth ministry, even though several, if not a majority of the folks in that listening session spoke for that. So it's disturbing to me that even after hearing such important conversation.
Oh, she can hear me.
Can you hear me?
I'm sorry. Yes, now we can. We're having trouble with our internet connection, believe it or not. And the owl is complaining, but, okay, go ahead.
Let me just finish up by saying that my support for this amendment.
Wow.
My Zoom just crashed.
I just lost my internet.
Me too.
I'm still on for whatever reason.
I'm good.
We can still hear you.
Yeah, we can still hear you and see you.
Well, that's because you hear and see me on the owl, but I didn't know if everybody's Zoom crashed or just mine, but I have lost my internet connection on my laptop, which means after Jocelyn Shipman, I can't see any hands yet, but hopefully it'll come back. Go ahead, Lynn, keep speaking if you don't mind.
Just to simply say that I am in support of this amendment and wanted to express my concern that after the listening session, there was no adjustment in the budget given all of the conversation that took place.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Jocelyn Shipman?
Yes.
I can't, if you have the
Yes.
floor, thank you.
Okay, thank you. This is Jocelyn Shipman, ruling elder from Bon Air Presbyterian Church. And I would like to say that I am in support of the amendment presented by Colleen, because we speak so often of our young people and our children not being churched and finding ways to engage them in the church and with the church. And Camp Hanover is an excellent way. I have been with young people from First United Presbyterian Church out at Camp Hanover, and again, engaging them outside of the pews will give them at least one leg on a three-legged stool of support for continuing to be interested and participate in ministry. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. Appreciate it. Barbara, can you see if anyone else has a
Tom
hand?
Coy has his hand raised.
Pardon me?
Tom Coy.
Tom Coy? You have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, moderator. It's hard to speak against the motion. The arguments for it are very, very positive, and my heart is there too. It's the method of going back to the CMD fund and taking money, which is the problem that got us here in the first place. By spending so much from it, we have this enormous deficit. I'm just concerned that we're using the same behavior. We're not really learning from our experience of the last several months. So I'm going to vote against the motion.
Thank you. Do we have any more hands up?
Samuel Curtin.
Samuel Curtin.
Thank you, moderator. Kirk O'Cliff and Mineral. I'm going to speak out of both sides of my mouth. I support this motion because I saw it as one of the most engaging ways for the youth in our congregation to be involved in the ministry of the church. But I also at the same time realize it's potentially going to further exacerbate the problem of the bottom line, but I do support it as stated.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Do we have another hand up?
Todd Davidson.
Who?
Todd Davidson.
Todd Davidson? you have the floor.
Todd Davidson from Sandston Presbyterian. I speak in favor of the motion. Agree with everything that has been said and would like to add, given recent events, supporting a place where everybody is welcome and accepted as God made them to be and as who they are is even more important. So I wholeheartedly support it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is that it, or is there?
That's it.
That's
Need a
it.
motion to close debate or?
All right, I will entertain a motion to close debate.
So moved.
Thank you, seconded. It's been seconded. All right. Is there any objection to closing debate? Seeing none. Seeing none, debate is closed and we will move to voting on this amendment. Hold on. Where I've got it open. But I don't see it. Oh, here it is. So the motion that we have is to adjust the amount given to the ministry of Camp Hanover to $102,000 to be taken from the Church Development Ministries Fund. So that's the motion we have before us. The poll is up. All right, we have, the motion, votes in yes, 48, votes no, 35, the motion passes. So.
Gordon Mapes was the next.
Yes, I know. All right, Gordon Mapes, you have a motion?
I do. Thank you, Madam Moderator. Gordon Mapes, teaching elder Chester, member of Commission on Ministry. I would amend the budget to reduce the COM budget by $2,500. If there's a second, I will speak to it.
Second.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, co-moderator. This amount of $2,500 represents an initiative of the former presbyters. At this time, neither the COM leadership nor the temporary general presbyter have plan or intention to implement a pastor's retreat in 2025.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Do we have anyone to speak in favor or opposed?
Gary Charles has his hand raised.
Gary Charles has his hand raised. Gary, you have the floor.
Moderator, I am not speaking to this motion, but would like to make an observation after with this vote.
All right, I will put you in the queue. Thank you, Gary.
There's a second. Do you want to speak to it?
No, it does not.
Okay.
Do we have any other hands up?
Do not see any.
Entertain a motion to close debate. Need a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any objection to ending debate on this motion? All right, the motion before us passes. The motion to close debate passes without objection. The motion before us is to reduce the COM budget by $2,500. The poll is up.
Yeah.
Oh, forgive me, we need a second for that. That's coming from an individual.
There was a second to put it on the floor. The second was on the floor.
Second
Oh,
came
there
from
was a
Kelly
second.
Ray, Kellyanne Real.
Thank you, okay,
Kelly and Real.
thank you, Blink.
Yeah. Okay. All offended. And actually, I have by one more, no more.
All right, we have a, okay, is that number 84? We have, on the, COM budget reduction, we have yay votes 84, nay 2, the motion passes. Do we have any more motions to come before the body? I don't have anybody in the queue. I have Gary Charles who wants to make an observation, so let's do that now.
Gary Charles, pastor, Cove Presbyterian Church, minister member. About 2 hours ago, I suggested that we postpone action on adoption of the budget because we didn't have enough information. And the debate that's followed the last 2 hours has been a case in point. Whenever we do vote on this budget, I will be voting against it, hoping that we can gather the minds of the presbytery and have these important conversations rather than trying to act like a committee of the whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further comments or motions? I am not seeing any hands. Is there anybody who can see if hands go
I
up?
do not see anyone. I see Gary Charles' hands, the only one raised.
Okay. All right then, Gary is still up from before. All right then, with no further motions with which to dispense, we are back to the original motion as amended.
The budget as amended.
What?
Do you need a total?
No, he's asked for it. Do you want to?
Well, I think that,
all right,
my opinion is that we've made these adjustments. All I can give you is the total to the bottom line.
Carrie's.
With all these things that they've done, unless they don't, if they don't want to know, that's fine.
No, it's fine. Carrie's gonna read out the number, the bottom line numbers as a result of the amendments that have been taken.
So taking into consideration the actions that we've taken, previously on line number 139, the deficit was 207,977. With the add-ons and the subtractions, the new deficit number is $272,477.
Adamson has.
I see that. Pete, do you have a comment? Oh, goodness, we've got hands coming up. All right. Pete Adamson, you have the floor. Pete Adamson? Can you hear me?
Hello, I'm sorry.
Hello.
Pete Adamson, ruling elder, Providence Forge. Question, if this budget is not approved or subsequent to January the 1st, does the Presbytery continue to operate under the 2024 budget and those spending levels?
Yes.
Or what?
Yes, that's how we would do it. That's how it's been done often in the past.
So if nothing's done, they'll continue with the budget into 2025 with a spending level deficit at 779,000 and some odd change.
Well, except that we already know that we aren't spending at that level. we already know we're not gonna rehire those expensive executives that we couldn't afford. I mean, there's a lot we know won't happen. And when we get to a budget 6 weeks after the year starts, we should be all right.
Okay, thank you.
Alex Krieger.
Alex Krieger, your hand is up.
Yeah, I want to put forward that we put the motion to vote.
All right. We have essentially the question has been called. Is there any objection to calling the question? Right. Seeing none,
We're ready to watch the budget.
we'll put
Is there
the
a
poll.
second?
On launching, there was.
Was there a second? Is the question that was spoken out loud? Did someone second Alex's motion?
To call the question,
Yeah.
I second it.
Okay, it is seconded, yes.
Seconded as well.
Okay. Right, so we're ready to launch the,
Pardon me?
we're ready.
Yes, we're ready to launch the question. This is the budget as amended.
Excellent. Give those a few more seconds. Voted.
All right. We have, what's that? Scroll down. We have, the results, as amended, the budget, there were 55 yes votes and 35 no votes. The motion passes. Thank you, everyone. My gosh, we've had an evening, haven't we?
You still got 13 minutes to play with it.
No.
I don't know about the rest of you, but I haven't had any dinner yet, so I'm about to start getting cranky. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your presence, for your patience with us and with our technology. The POJ guest internet connection that all of us except staff use went down while we were going, and that's what sort of threw us off here. So process that wasn't all that graceful, got lumpier still. I'm very grateful that you all put up with it, very grateful. And I'm really grateful to our staff who just scurried around the room and threw together what they had to throw together to keep things going. Jess and Barbara and Barry, thank you so much for rising to the occasion. Having completed our agreed upon business, I declare that the November 19th special meeting of the Presbytery of the James is adjourned. Mr. Stephen Clerk, would you please close us with prayer?
Let us pray. Lord, as we come to the end of this meeting, we offer our thanks and praise to you. Thank you for your presence with us and for guiding our discussions. We ask for your blessings as we depart from here. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Very.